Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with InsideTheU, back here for another 10 takeaways and tidbits following today's 10th spring practice based on interviews with Manny Diaz, quarterbacks Tyler Van Dyke, and Jake Garcia. First off, for everybody that jumped in on the live stream last night, I appreciate it. And you noticed that I released a promo code for anybody interested in supporting InsideTheU.com and the InsideTheU channel. And for that promo code, it's $5 off t-shirts or anything that you're interested in. It's QB5 off is the promo code. Okay, first takeaway, Manny Diaz was asked what it's like being the defensive coordinator. Once again, it's a responsibility he took on in the offseason, and he said he's really enjoying it, feels natural at that, not a surprise there. Basically, he said it's about the players making plays. It doesn't matter who the play caller is, and partly that is true. But one of the things that stood out to me with Diaz in his response, he really feels like the defense needs to get back to having an edge. And I think that's a strong statement to make. I also believe it's such an important thing to have, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Everybody knows Miami's got to be playing with the edge on defense. They've got to improve their defense, and Diaz is hoping him switching over will help improve that for heading into 2021. Okay, my second takeaway has to do with quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. I asked Tyler how things are going in the spring, but basically just wanted to know what are some things he's working on outside of practices, outside of team meetings to improve himself. And he said right after practice, he likes to go watch film, see some things that he wants to correct and do better at, as opposed to waiting when the team watches film together the next day. So I thought that was good. He likes to do that. He also likes to come back to the facility, get some more work in the afternoon. Particularly, he said he wants to work on his conditioning. He's been doing that because the quarterbacks, in practices are not getting hit, and it's a little bit different than the other positions. But he wants to make sure he's out there working on his conditioning. He said he's been working on running some half gassers, doing some things like that to improve on. So I thought those were all positive signs for Tyler Van Dyke. Number 3, quarterback Jake Garcia really impressed a lot of people with the numbers he put up. 15 for 19, 188 yards and a touchdown in his first spring scrimmage. All great. Manny Diaz said everybody was most excited about just Jake's composure. He was a guy that had been slowed with how he performed in the spring because of a foot injury. But basically the day before the scrimmage, he was fully cleared. And Manny Diaz didn't really know exactly what Jake was going to be able to do and how he was going to perform in the scrimmage because it was just such a different setting than what he's been dealing with. And basically, he was really impressed with how he performed. He was a guy that showed a lot of composure. Basically, he said he was a guy that it felt like he'd just been here a really long time, not a guy that just got here in January. So all positive signs for a young quarterback, a young player. You always want guys to feel comfortable sooner than later. So definitely sounds like Jake's on the right track. My number 4 takeaway is defensive end Zach McLeod continuing to impress as he makes the transition from linebacker to defensive end. You heard earlier in the spring, Zach was really excited about doing this on a full-time basis. He did it a little bit last year at the end in the bowl game, but now he's fully integrated at defensive end. Manny Diaz actually said, look, he's actually exceeded my expectations. It's not that Diaz didn't think he was going to be good at it, but just this soon, and he really feels like he's a natural at that spot. So positive signs for Zach. Maybe he can make a really good impact in his final year at Miami that he's been looking to do since he's been here. So those are good signs. Manny Diaz also compared him a little bit to Trent Harris, the way that he really produced those final couple years. And if Zach McLeod can produce at that level, that would certainly be a welcome addition to the defense. So we'll see how things continue to go for Zach McLeod. Number 5. I asked Manny Diaz, look, what are you most pleased with through the 10 spring practices? He thought about it for a little bit, and then he came back and said he is most pleased with the offensive line depth. And I think that's such a good thing to hear because the offensive line has certainly been criticized with its play the last couple years, improved last year, but certainly needs to take another step. And he feels good with the depth. You know about the 7 guys competing for those top 5 spots, but Manny actually mentioned he feels comfortable rolling out 7, 8, even 9 guys on the offensive line. Those are all great signs because you can't have enough offensive linemen. So good to hear there that things are going well with the offensive line. Number 6, Tennessee transfer Deandre Johnson, a defensive end, has not been talked about much this spring. I've been curious about how he's been doing. Has he been out there? And Coach Diaz was asked about him specifically and basically said he's been dealing with some health and safety protocols that has limited him. But today was the first time he's actually been out there for team practices. So a good sign for Deandre. Hopefully he's okay. But also, hopefully he can finish the spring strong as he gets acclimated to the new defense. We'll see how he does these next 5 practices. Definitely want to check in to get a better update on Deandre at the end of spring ball, which concludes next week. Number 7. A big part of the spring is the scrimmages. Miami's had 1 so far. The second one is scheduled for Friday. It's going to be a night scrimmage. Great to hear. They're going to work on a lot of things. The thing you're looking forward to with that scrimmage is you want guys that did well in the first scrimmage to continue that production in the second one. It's not that any scrimmage is weighted any more than the other, but I definitely believe that second scrimmage is so big because you want guys to really establish themselves. You can look at one scrimmage and say, well, that was nice. I'll keep my eyes open for a guy, as he continues to progress. But if he does it again in that second one, I think that's just a huge indication that this guy is really producing and developing at the rate that you want him to. So keep your eyes locked into InsideTheU.com for more information and plenty of coverage on the scrimmage later this week. So that's certainly a big one. Number 8. Manny Diaz mentioned that he feels like the defensive line and the offensive line are showing signs of being more physical up front. I think this is important because I think it's been certainly a point of emphasis for the team heading into 2021. I feel like based on some of the moves and the way that Manny Diaz has talked about with the strength and conditioning program, he really wants this to be an area of improvement for the group. The fact that he feels like he's seeing signs of that so far, it's definitely good to hear. Once again, one of those things to certainly monitor as the spring concludes and as we get into the summer months, because that is certainly a big deal as well. But certainly, if you stayed locked into these takeaways and tidbits, you heard a lot about in the spring how guys were already making increased improvements with their weight and strength numbers just in the last few months. So look for more of that to come. Number 9, Manny Diaz was asked, look, who's doing well at wide receiver? Who is impressing you? And he listed a bunch of names, but he started with Mike Harley, and there's no surprise there. Mike's had a good spring. He's continuing to be the leader of that group, but also he mentioned the other guys doing well. He's curious to see how they perform as it goes on. But one of the things he said with this wide receiver group, he feels confident, yet he said maybe it's a bit optimistic, but he really does feel like they're going to have more than 3 wide receivers that they can play and feel comfortable with this next season. He actually feels like they could have 6 to 8 receivers. Once again, he said maybe it's a bit optimistic. And he also made note, look, it might not be the same amount of playing time for all of these guys, but he just wants guys that when they're in there, he really wants them to produce, and he really feels like they're going to do that. So keep your eyes locked on the wide receivers as they continue to try to make plays and separate themselves from the pack. My number 10 and final takeaway from today's spring practice has to do with a little bit with recruiting. And it's just the point that Manny Diaz believes that in June is going to be a pivotal month for recruiting because he thinks official visits will open up and other visits, off anything on campus. He thinks that's going to open up. A lot of schools are feeling optimistic with that as well. So he feels like a lot of movement will happen in June. So definitely it's not anything for sure, but he's just optimistic about that as well. So those are my 10 takeaways and tidbits from today's spring practice. For more complete information, check out InsideTheU.com. And also you can follow me on Twitter at InsideTheU. And don't forget, check out the InsideTheU store, the merchandise, the promo code QB5OFF. Thanks again for all your support and take care.